No matter how hard she tries, everything always ends up the same. The only time she ever feels relief is when she takes a life. The world is full of people desperately trying to conceal their flaws, but once they're dead, their bodies become so easy to manipulate. And then, just like always, they recoil in horror. They tell her they can't stand to look at her anymore before vanishing from her life altogether. No one loves her. That man, he was just like all the rest. Sitting on the cold ground, she stares blankly ahead, the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her. At this moment, she wishes she were dead. Then a boy approaches. His presence pulls her back to reality, if only for a moment. "Are you okay?" she asks, her voice barely above a whisper. Instead of answering, he offers her something unexpected. "Would you like something to drink?" She hesitates, then nods. "Yeah, I would." As they sit in silence elsewhere, he finally speaks again. "What's your name?" She looks at him, her expression unreadable. "Sashigo Hiro," she replies. Curious, she finally asks why he came up to her in the first place. "You looked lost," he replies simply. He goes on to explain that he knows that feeling all too well. There was a time when he lived consumed by anxiety, dreading every morning, wishing he wouldn't wake up at all. But eventually, he found something that pulled him out of that darkness. She leans in, intrigued. "What was it?" His answer is simple. "I started believing in the existence of God. That was all I needed, just a belief." To her, believing in something that doesn't exist is absurd. But the boy insists. Faith saved him, and it can save her too. His conviction lingers in her mind, stirring something unfamiliar. Then she speaks. "Then be my God," she says, her voice steady but desperate. If she can't believe in something unseen, she'll believe in him. It doesn't matter whether God is real or not. What matters is that someone, anyone, can save her. And maybe he's that person. Caught off guard, the boy hesitates. He has no idea how to respond. I'll be right back," he stammers before quickly excusing himself, heading toward the bathroom in a flustered panic. Time passes, but he never comes back. The waitress approaches, informing her that they're closing orders. With a sigh, she asks for the bill, her frustration bubbling beneath the surface. Leaving the place, she clenches her fists, seething. Another liar, he spoke of saving her, preached about belief, but in the end he ran just like everyone else. And before she even had time to process it, he was already inside that suitcase. People always seem their most honest just before they vanish, revealing their true selves in those fleeting final moments. And when she kills them, she owns them, if only for an instant. In that moment, they become the most vivid, unforgettable part of her existence. That's why she can't stop. Yet deep down, despite everything, she still clings to a small, fragile hope. Maybe one day, salvation will find her. Exhaustion weighed heavily on her. Morning had already arrived, and the first bus of the day rumbled down the street. She knew she should head home and get some rest. As she walked, lost in thought, she suddenly collided with someone. A boy wrapped in bandages from head to toe. She hadn't been paying attention. Without thinking, she reached out, cupping his face in both hands. Her intense gaze locked onto his, making Kippa shift uncomfortably. A long silence stretched between them before she finally spoke. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern flickering in her tired eyes. Seeing him covered in bandages, she worried that the impact might have reopened some of his wounds. But Kiba quickly reassured her. "I'm fine," he said. Relieved, she let out a small breath and nodded. "Just be more careful from now on." As he watched her disappear into the distance, one thought lingered in his mind. She was surprisingly tall. Meanwhile, as she walked away, the encounter replayed in her mind. Why had she held his face like that? Even she didn't know. The boy had looked startled, maybe even afraid. Had she made him uncomfortable? His expression had seemed almost disgusted. Or was that just her imagination? Doubt crept in, twisting her thoughts into knots. What if he thought she was suspicious? What if she had made a terrible impression? The uncertainty gnawed at her. She couldn't take it anymore. She had to set things straight, immediately. The air was filled with excitement. School was finally over, and the celebrations had begun. She turned to Kiba, curiosity in her eyes. "Are you free later?" There was a big sale happening nearby, but since she and Rio had other plans, she needed someone to go in her place. Without much thought, Kiba agreed. As he did, a woman nearby took a moment to study his uniform, realizing he was just a student. Tamada beamed at him, her gratitude evident. And then, without warning, she kissed him. Kaiba froze, his mind scrambling to process what had just happened. With a playful smile, she told him they'd see each other soon and walked away, leaving him flustered and confused. But beneath the surface, frustration stirred. He couldn't just let things go like this. He couldn't give up on her. Realizing he was short on time, Kaiba picked up his pace. The sale ended at 6, and it was already past 5. He had to move fast. But just as he was rushing through the crowded streets, a firm hand caught hold of his shirt, yanking him to a stop. Startled, he turned to see the woman he had bumped into earlier. Her intense gaze locked onto his. "What do you think of me?" she asked, her voice laced with urgency. For a moment, Keba hesitated, staring at her face until recognition finally clicked. Before he could answer, a voice cut through the tension. It was Tamada. She had found them, and she did not look pleased. "Step away from Keba," she said, her tone sharp and unwavering. Intrigued, the woman asked if the girl was talking about her. She insisted that she had no intention of scaring anyone. She simply wanted to have a quick conversation with him. That seemed to pique Toad's curiosity. However, the girl remained unfazed. She firmly stated that the boy was hers and warned the woman to keep her hands off him. Without another word, she turned and began to walk away with him. The woman couldn't help but feel unsettled. The way the girl spoke, it was as if she didn't acknowledge her presence at all. That indifference made her thoughts spiral. She started to wonder what kind of expression would Tamada wear if she were on the brink of death. But no, she couldn't act on those thoughts. Not yet. She had to restrain herself. Kibo sighed in disappointment. He hadn't been able to buy the eggs. But Tamada didn't seem to mind. With a cheerful smile, she reassured him, "At least we got ice cream." The dessert was a vibrant swirl of colors, eye-catching and unique. Tamada's favorite flavor was a striking shade of bright pink, yet surprisingly it tasted like mint chocolate. At first glance, no one would have guessed. She playfully offered Kibo a bite, but he shook his head. "I'm not a fan of chocolate," he admitted. Tamada chuckled. "Noted. I'll remember that." She happily continued eating, but in her excitement, a small scoop of ice cream dripped onto her blouse. She pouted, visibly annoyed. With a determined look, she quickly finished the rest of her ice cream. She needed to clean her blouse before the stains set in. Meanwhile, he and Rio were told to stay put and behave. They nodded in agreement, promising to wait for her return. Tamada gave them a grateful smile before heading off. In the restroom, she washed her hands, relieved to find no lingering stains. With that taken care of, she was ready to head back. But just as she turned to leave, a tall woman loomed behind her. Before Tamada could react, a hand clamped over her mouth, muffling her gasp. The woman's voice was cold and firm. "Stay quiet from now on," she whispered, tightening her grip. "If you make a scene, you die." Outside, her friends began to grow uneasy. Tamada had been gone for longer than expected. A sense of concern settled over them. "Kiba, do you think something happened?" Rio asked, glancing toward the restroom. Kiba's expression darkened. "She's taking too long. Can you check on her?" Rio nodded without hesitation and headed toward the restroom. But when she arrived, the space was empty. Tamada was nowhere to be found. A chill ran down her spine as she scanned the room. Rushing back to Kiba, her voice was tense. "She's gone. I looked everywhere, but there's no sign of her." Then she held up something she had found on the restroom floor. Tamada's scarf. The one she always wore. Something was very, very wrong. Panic started creeping in. Rio's gut told her something was wrong. Had Tamada been kidnapped? The thought alone sent a wave of dread through her. Her legs gave out and she collapsed to the ground, overwhelmed. Kiba rushed to her side, shaking her shoulders. "Rio, snap out of it." Before he could do more, Rio's eyes snapped open. But something was different. Without warning, she lunged forward, delivering a forceful headbutt straight to Kiba's forehead. Groaning in pain, he stumbled back, clutching his head. "What the hell, Rio?" But the person standing before him wasn't Rio anymore. Rina had awakened. Annoyed, she dusted herself off and shot him an impatient glare. "No time to waste. We're finding Tamada now." Her voice was sharp, filled with urgency. "Does she have a tracker on her phone?" she asked. That question sparked a memory in Keba's mind. His eyes widened. "Wait, I registered her headphones and phone on my device. We can track her location." Rina smirked. "Then what are we waiting for?" Tamada found herself trapped in a small, enclosed space, held hostage with no clear escape. Despite the situation, she remained unfazed, her expression sharp with mockery. With a smirk, she tilted her head. "Let's not waste time. Just send me home already." The woman said nothing, only tightening the blindfold over Tamada's eyes. That alone told her something. They weren't planning to kill her. At least not yet. But the moment the blindfold was ripped away, a new thought crept into her mind. Had they changed their minds? The woman stood before her, eyes narrowed, scrutinizing every detail. There was something about Tamada that didn't sit right. What's with this girl? The woman muttered under her breath. No panic, no fear. What was she hiding? The woman narrowed her eyes. Are you not afraid of anything? Tamada tilted her head, a slight smirk playing on her lips. Afraid. What exactly? The woman expected hesitation, maybe even a flicker of fear, but there was none. If you mean death, Tamada continued casually, I'm not scared of that at all. Actually, I'm curious. She leaned back slightly, as if discussing something trivial. What really happens after death? Is it just nothingness? Or is there something else waiting beyond? Her voice carried an eerie sense of wonder. Only the dead get to know the truth. To her, death wasn't something to be feared. It was simply another part of life, a mystery she was in no hurry to solve, but one she wasn't afraid to face. But there was something Tamada enjoyed even more, saving the best for last. She wasn't going to die here. She knew that much, which meant she had room to negotiate. With a confident smirk, she looked the woman in the eye. How about a deal? Let me control your life instead. Meanwhile, her friends had tracked down her location. She had to be close. A signal led them to a cluster of apartments, their eyes scanning every window, every doorway. She was here. Somewhere. Then, out of nowhere, a strange sound. Something off. A chill ran down their spines. Kaiba tensed and turned to the girl beside him. Find a place to hide. Now she hesitated. If something happens, he continued, voice firm. I'll yell. The second you hear me, call the police. Concern crept into her mind. Would he be okay? If the kidnapper was a towering brute, or worse, armed, he could be walking straight into danger. But there was no time for hesitation. He ran, heart pounding, only to find himself at a dead end. Damn it. But this wasn't the moment to lose focus. Tamada had saved him before. Now it was his turn to return the favor. The woman slammed her fist against the wall, the force so strong that pain shot through her hand. But she didn't care. Don't talk like you understand, she snapped. You can't do anything for me. But Tamada didn't flinch. Instead, she met her gaze with unwavering confidence. Maybe no one really knows for sure, she said. But I might understand what's going on in your mind. That struck a nerve. The woman's expression darkened. Being understood, that was something she had longed for her entire life. Tamada looked at the woman with a knowing expression. You've suffered a lot, haven't you? She said, her voice steady yet piercing. No one understands you. No one loves you. People only come into your life when they need something, then leave the moment you're no longer useful. They abandon you like you never mattered. She paused, letting the words sink in. They're the irresponsible ones, Tamada continued. I understand because I've been there too. When no one loves you, you make them love you. And when God doesn't exist, you create one. Her eyes locked onto the woman's. That's why I'm willing to become your God. If you truly want to follow me, Tamada said calmly, then start by untying these ropes. She leaned forward slightly, her voice carrying an eerie certainty. Do it with your own hands, I promise. I'll pull you out of this despair. I'll save you. She let the words linger before tilting her head slightly. But if you choose not to, if you decide to move forward and end this here, her gaze sharpened. Then know this, salvation will never come for you. That door will close forever. Cuss fought to break down the door, his heart pounding with urgency. The moment it gave way, he rushed inside, only to freeze in shock. The same strange woman from before was kneeling before Tamada, her lips pressed against Tamada's hand in a gesture of devotion. Tamada turned to him, her expression calm, almost amused. I knew you'd come, she said with unwavering confidence. I never doubted you. But Cuss wasn't reassured. His mind raced with questions. What the hell is going on here? He demanded. Tamada smiled slightly, lifting her now free wrists. She untied me, she explained. Kaiba stood there, utterly confused. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of the situation. Then, who kidnapped you? He asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Tamada, completely unfazed, glanced at him with a calm expression. The same person who set me free, she replied smoothly. Kaiba's eyes darted to the woman kneeling beside her. The woman met his gaze, her voice steady but filled with an eerie devotion. I abandoned the idea of killing her, because now I see her as my god. Kiba felt his stomach drop. This was beyond anything he expected. What? But before he could process it, the woman spoke again, her tone unwavering. And now, it's time for the first divine revelation. Tamada looked at the woman with a calm yet commanding presence. From now on, you will not take another life unless I order it. Can you carry that burden? The woman fell silent, her expression unreadable. After a brief pause, she nodded. I think I can. A sudden realization struck her. Amid everything that had happened, they hadn't even exchanged names. I just realized we never introduced ourselves, she murmured. Tamada tilted her head slightly, a faint smile playing on her lips. Tamada, that's my name. The woman hesitated for a moment, as if the weight of her own identity had become unfamiliar to her. Then, with a quiet breath, she finally spoke. Sako Hiro. Once introductions were out of the way, Tamada offered a polite yet knowing smile. It's a pleasure to meet you, Sako. Kiba watched her carefully. There was something unsettling about that smile. It carried the innocence of a child, yet beneath it lurked a quiet cruelty. It was as if she understood something no one else did, and that thought sent a shiver down his spine. Meanwhile, outside, another girl stood at the door, her patience wearing thin. She hesitated before attempting to enter, frustration evident in her eyes. More than anything, she just wanted someone, anyone, to explain what was going on. At school, Tamada playfully nudged Kiba, drawing his attention to her outfit. "Look, I'm back in the summer uniform again," she announced with a grin. The change in attire was a clear sign. The season had arrived once more. She glanced at his arm and smirked. Must be a relief to finally have it free, huh? Kiba, however, had something else on his mind. "So what happened after Sako?" he asked, his curiosity lingering on their last encounter. Tamada leaned back slightly, a knowing look in her eyes. "She still reaches out to me from time to time," she said, leaving the rest unsaid. Kiba frowned. That answer felt too simple, too vague. "That's it," he pressed. Tamada met his gaze unfazed. "I just left her alone," she replied casually. That only made Kiba more uneasy. "But why? I thought you were going to save her. Why leave her like that?" His voice carried a mix of confusion and concern. Tamada's expression remained calm, almost serene. "Because true salvation is forged through suffering," she explained. "She hasn't endured enough yet. Only when she's been broken down completely can I rebuild her into something greater." A small smile played on her lips. "After all, how can I become the benevolent goddess I aspire to be if there's no one in need of saving?" Just as Kiba suspected, Tamada was merely toying with the situation, playing it like a game only she understood. Frustrated, he sighed. "You're taking this too far," he said, his voice edged with concern. Before she could respond, footsteps interrupted them. Someone was approaching. Kiba turned and immediately tensed. It was him, the same arrogant jerk from earlier. The guy who used to bully Kiba stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Got a minute? I need to talk to you," he said. Tamada scoffed, leaning back with a smirk. "Don't bother. It'll just be a waste of time." Unfazed, the bully shrugged. "Even if it is, that's my problem. I've got something to say to him." Kiba hesitated for a moment before following him out of the room. As they left, you could still feel Tamada's piercing gaze on their backs, cold, calculating, and almost menacing. On the rooftop, Kiba crossed his arms and frowned. "I'd rather not talk to you." The guy stepped closer, smirking. Still as annoying as ever. His tone was sharp, but there was something different in his eyes. "Tell me, was it you who posted that video online? Smart move. Or was it that transfer student's idea?" Kiba ignored the bait. "Just say what you came here for." The next words caught him completely off guard. "I'm here to apologize." Kiba froze. An apology from him? The sheer absurdity of it sent a surge of anger through him. Before he could even process why, his fist was already swinging. The punch landed hard against the guy's face. He didn't know why he did it. He just couldn't stop himself. Kaiba's rage boiled over. The audacity of this guy to act like an apology could erase everything. Like none of it ever happened. "You don't just get to say sorry and pretend it's fine," Kiba snapped, his fists clenched. His voice trembled, not with fear, but with barely contained fury. But the jerk just stood there, his expression unreadable. "I'm not pretending," he said calmly. "I just want to be friends." "Friends?" Kaiba's breath hitched. He felt something inside him crack, not from relief, but from pure anger. "Friends?" His voice was sharp, almost a growl. "Did you forget everything you put me through?" His hand shook. "Everything you did?" The guy lowered his gaze. "That's why I came to apologize," he admitted. "Because I know an apology won't fix anything." Kaiba didn't even think. His fist moved before his brain caught up. The second punch landed harder than the first. Frustration twisted in Kiba's chest. He couldn't wrap his head around it. Why was this guy suddenly trying to make things right? The jerk wiped the blood from his lip and sighed. "How many more times are you gonna hit me?" His voice wasn't angry, just tired. Kaiba's hands trembled. This wasn't fair. He had spent so long hating this guy, resenting him. If he stayed a jerk, Kaiba could hold onto that rage, that sense of justice. But if he changed, if he actually became a decent person, then what did that mean for Kiba? Because if the person he despised wasn't the villain anymore, then maybe Kiba was. The jerk let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. "You're a real weirdo, Kiba." He rubbed his jaw where the punch had landed, but his expression wasn't angry, just strangely calm. "I came to apologize, but if you don't want to forgive me, that's fine. Hate me all you want." His eyes darkened for a moment. "But tell me, are you really against the idea of me lifting this weight off my shoulders?" Kiba clenched his fists, his emotions swirling in a storm of confusion and rage. Seeing his reaction, the jerk smirked. "I guess not." He took a step closer, challenging. "Then let's settle this the old-fashioned way. A fight." His voice turned sharp, decisive. "If I win, you accept my apology, no more grudges. But if you win," he shrugged, "do whatever you want with me." Kiba gritted his teeth, his frustration boiling over. It's easy for you to say all this, he snapped. You can fight on equal footing with others, but I can't. Without hesitation, he lashed out, landing a brutal kick between the jerk's legs. It was a dirty move, but Kiba didn't care. Fairness had never been on his side. Fear gripped him, but he didn't stop. He threw punch after punch, his knuckles stinging with every hit. But before he could land another blow, the jerk caught his wrists, tightening his grip. Are you done yet? The jerk muttered, his voice strained. You've been hitting me non-stop since we started talking, and yeah, it freaking hurts. His expression was different now, not mocking or angry, just tired. You think I'm the one making things unfair? You always look down on me, no matter how hard I tried. All I wanted was to talk to you. At that moment, Kiba finally saw it, the conflicted heart standing before him. The jerk wasn't just some arrogant punk. He was someone who hated being ignored, someone who had been struggling in his own way. Before Kiba could process it further, the jerk clenched his fists, ready to strike back. But just as things were about to escalate, Tamada suddenly stepped in, forcing them apart. Ah, fists flying in the heat of youth. How poetic, she mused with a smirk. But you're still missing something. She paused, then grinned. You know what this fight really needs? She pointed at both of them dramatically. A generous dose of love. Tamada strolled up to the jerk with a playful smirk. Leaning in slightly, she asked, So, how about we create a little love? The jerk blinked, clearly confused. What? Without offering an explanation, she turned to Kiba with a knowing grin. Well then, Kiba, I'll be off. But don't even think about running away. Once I'm back, we'll settle this properly. And with that, she walked away, dragging the jerk along with her. Kiba stood frozen, watching them disappear, his mind racing with questions. What just happened? And more importantly, what was she planning? Class carried on as usual, but something felt off. Neither Tamada nor the jerk had returned, and the longer they were gone, the more irritated Kiba became. Just then, Hara approached, curiosity written all over her face. Hey, you know where Tamada went? Kiba's jaw tightened. She left with that guy. Hara raised an eyebrow. With him, Kiba's mind flashed back to Tamada's cryptic words. How about we create a little love? A wave of unease hit him. His imagination spiraled into unexpected places, and the thought alone sent a shock through his system. No way, that can't be it, right? But if it was, he wasn't sure he could handle it. Kiba's phone buzzed with a notification. Checking it, he saw that Tamada had returned home earlier than expected. Without wasting a second, he said a quick goodbye to Ahara and bolted home. As soon as Tamada stepped inside, she was met with Kiba's intense gaze. Before he could say anything, she spoke up. The jerk has something to tell you. Kiba narrowed his eyes. Of all the things he expected, this wasn't one of them. His mind instantly jumped to the worst-case scenario. Was this guy about to gloat? Brag about something they had done? A bad feeling settled in his gut. Whatever it was, he wasn't sure he wanted to hear it. The jerk stepped forward, his expression unusually serious. Kiba instinctively took a step back, raising a hand. Don't come any closer, he warned. But then, the words that followed stopped him cold. I love you. Kiba blinked, stunned. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. The jerk continued, saying he had finally realized his true feelings after talking with Tamada. What he had mistaken for rivalry or frustration was actually love. Kiba's brain short-circuited. How was he supposed to respond to that? Sensing his confusion, Tamada leaned in and whispered something in his ear. Her words sent a chill down his spine. Oh, by the way, I kind of brainwashed him, she admitted with a smirk. Kiba's eyes widened in horror. She went on to explain that since he didn't want to be bullied anymore, she figured the best way to prevent it was to make the jerk fall in love with him. And to her surprise, it had worked even more smoothly than she expected. This was beyond insane. The jerk, now more curious than ever, narrowed his eyes. What are you two whispering about? Kiba shot him a glare. Shut up. But before he could process what was happening, the jerk suddenly grabbed his hand, gripping it with surprising determination. I don't care how long it takes, he said with unwavering confidence. I'll do whatever it takes to make you like me. Kiba felt a shiver run down his spine. This was getting out of control, way worse than he ever could have imagined. Tamada stepped closer, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Oh, by the way, I have something to tell you, she said casually. Before Kiba could react, she dropped the bombshell. I'm planning a girls' night tonight. Sorry for the short notice. Kiba blinked, already sensing trouble. But don't worry, she continued with a sweet smile. You can just stay over at the jerk's place in the meantime. His stomach dropped. Of all the possible outcomes, this was easily one of the worst. And with that, the video cuts to black.